A great welcome, dear guests of the spiritual channel on YouTube, with Gnosis and EB. And welcome to the 17th sequence of this series of videos. It is titled 017 Reality. And that is our topic now to be treated. So we start right away with it. First of all, we should define what we understand by the term reality. Let's go for it, back to the meaning of the term, which is given with a real effect. We can therefore say that what works has effect, and thus creates reality. Reality is based therefore always on an actuality, within the scope of the principle of causality. That is the principle of cause and effect, how is likely well known. Conversely, we can say that no reality can be possible without causality. For, where no cause is, logically, then there is also no effect for reality. And where no effect is, there can be also no cause for a causal chain. The reality in itself is from there an almost infinite chain of causal events. However, it can logically absolutely not come out of nowhere and run into nothingness, with which we get a beginning plus an ending for a causal chain. However, the causality is always valid and under every condition. What means that in the causal chain, for this causal chain, the ending has to cause the beginning. With it, in turn, we get a closed causal loop, which defines the causality law. That was already subject in the 002 causality sequence, and thus need here not be further explained. However, within the scope of our reality topic, we should treat the causal circle with its interface closer. 4. Beginning and ending of the causal circle define a self-interface for a super-reality. It is, so to speak, the navel of all world reality. Because in this interface is to decide, via choice possibility, whether a causal circle exists at all, or not. Assuming the decision would be such that the causal loop does not exist. Then we would have, instead a causal circle, only a bare nothingness. This led to the question, whether then bare nothingness, or a complete nothing, can also be reality. However, we would get with it an ugly contradiction to the causality, which must be the epitome of reality. So, if the nothingness can be no reality of its own, then the nothingness must be at least a part of the reality in itself. Namely within the scope of inner the universe always and everywhere given polarity and duality. In it the non-existence exists as empty nothing, and so as counterpole to the being of and thereby total bipolar existence. Can one say that, EB?
We should here disregard customary philosophical considerations about the reality, gnosis, for they apparently pass the core of the matter. However, as you have explained quite properly, gnosis, all reality depends on the causality. As synonyms for reality, the glossary still lists the following concepts. These are fact, actual fact, life, practice, reality, state of affairs, circumstances, and truth. To an umbrella term contracted, this results in the reality as such. We cannot think with the logic an existence which has no causality and therefore also has no reality. Yeah, gnosis, one can say that nothingness as not existence gives the pole, and the fact that this pole forms a counterpole to the existence, for thereby bipolar existence. In the frame of the polarity, as bipolarity gets nothingness half part, in the reality of existence. And the existence only, with the half part nothing together, as binarity, in such functional unity its reality. Because total singularity, or all-encompassing, makes non-representational, without any object, to a monopole in nullity. The monopole becomes in its nullity to a kind of death trap for reality, wherein reality disappears to nothing. If one takes this death trap in such effective deadliness as reality, you come to a perversion of reality. Here exists the death trap virtually as a kind of anti-reality, and thus as a contradiction to reality. And exactly with it deals the universe, very initially in and with its system. For in the very beginning of an all-encompassing, totally singular primordial energy, the universe is still non-objective, monopolar. However, only on the one hand, because on the other hand, the universe is embodied in a person and thus against itself capable of action. And so the universal person is challenged very initially in itself to overcome the death trap for the monopolar non-objectivity or concreteness. It does this with a self-division to two positions, which qualifies as a subject against itself to act as an object. The action takes place in the form of a primordial, energetic, big banging and objectivity producing self-repulsion. Because the primordial energy is embodied in the universal person, becomes its self-repulsion to a self-repulsion of the primordial energy. This big banging act installs at the same time and in one the causal reality of a binarity and duality which is constructing the world. Also, this was addressed in the pre-sequences quite several times, Gnosis. With the Big Bang universe, we receive a world of causal reality which can be seen in space and time differently and be experienced. From there, the individual doubts also came always and everywhere. What is actually true then and real?
That truth and reality closely linked must be, seems to be clear. How and in what way can we neglect here once? Anyway, the vast majority will know it, that there is a direct connection. What concerns the doubts called by you about truth and reality, E.B., is there in the Bible an interesting spot? Namely in the dialogue of Jesus Christ with Pontius Pilate. There one says in John, chapter 18, verse 38, Pilate speaks to Jesus, "What is truth?" One could and should think that, nevertheless, always only one single truth can be given. So one that coincides with the general objective reality, if such can be determined. The problem, besides, exists in my opinion in the ever-individual, subjective perceptions, at an objective event. Because the objective event, it cannot be denied, it can only be true, and real in itself. To understand this, however, in its full reality, the natural senses are seldom sufficient. About science and technology, we have invented to us, a whole arsenal of instruments and devices. With them it is possible, otherwise undetected remaining data and facts, to notice and utilize. Then they provide in their sum, a much more comprehensive picture of each targeting event. But whether ever a complete picture of an event can be obtained, remains questionable, despite all techniques. And the more complex the targeting event is, the more difficult will be therefore its perception. From psychology, for example, many sources of error are known, which at an observation lead to a wrong result. Optical illusions, and other forms of deception, let us perceive a reality, which so does not exist. With which we are back again, at the question of the pilot, what is truth? Then we must ask ourselves, what Jesus had meant when he said in John, chapter 18, verse 37, I was born, and came into the world, that I testify to the truth, and anyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Evie, you are a respected expert here. What do you mean, what Jesus Christ wanted to Pilate say?
Whether that would have been understood by Pilate, however, I doubt seriously. Although Pilate's question of truth, one was quite intelligent and is indicative of a good school education. What now Jesus this truth meant, this is first definitely a concealed truth and reality. For that it cannot be easily accessible results therewith that it needs for it obviously a special witness. A witness like Jesus, who specially came into the world to make known there this concealed truth and reality. But which truth and reality actually gnosis? To find out here this, we must view as the other announcement of Jesus plus his work. In the core was his subject, in accordance to the four Gospels, the so-called Empire of God, as a kingdom of heaven and paradise, which is not from this world, and what is to be obtained in the Holy Communion and also Apocalypse, exclusively by an inclusion of Jesus into the each own person. However, certainly nobody could understand this up to the time of his phenomena as from the dead risen. For the Holy Communion action with food and drinking of his physicality was apparently and at first incomprehensible symbolic action. In some way, as it is still today practiced by the churches at the fairs, with the wine as the blood and the oblatus as meat. Only with Pentecost, as spirit receipt, are cured via participation on the universal spirit, at the same time are participating to the person of Jesus. Thus should be placed the existence of the respective receiving on a new basis as a new life reality. This new life reality is in the quintessence those truth which was meant by Jesus in talk with Pilate. It is the truth and reality of a timeless, forever indestructible life in the universal person of the all-encompassing world originator, where also the universal person the all-encompassing existence embodies. If you are asking now, which difference this eternal reality has in comparison to our present time as a transitory reality, then there is always at a constant total singularity only the following possibility, namely the fact that this must be a question of a different polar consciousness, from which two kinds of forms of consciousness result as polar forms of the self-perception and world-perception. So that ergo the general, existential truth these both realities contains. So when Jesus comes into the world to give here testimony of the truth, then is the truth effectively two polar world realities. Two polar world realities as two polar modes of existence, and so two polar realities to experience the existence. This duality of existence announces Jesus in many of his other utterances. In principle, probably, the later Christian Church made from it heaven and hell, gnosis, whereby, tragically, these ideas, with the reality per se, are not congruent.
It is really tragic how ideas of the hell and purgatory could arise, and thus distorted the truth. But, for the description of states of the soul, these images are to apply yet quite well, because soul states describe subjective perceptions of an otherwise, usually objective reality. In the course of its life, every person will probably experience once emotionally, heaven and hell as impersonal, internal state. The one more, the other less, caused by external or internal experiences. Moreover, the one person more the celestial, and the other person more the hellish, such as in a drug consumption. It is rather rare that in life both can be experienced with the same intensity. But apart from psychologically subjective states, are with time and the eternity, objective states of reality associated. For, nevertheless, clearly is that the time, as a transitoriness, everything in it originating, let pass again likewise with all means. All means, these are, as everybody knows, all forms of decline and extinction, by injuries, illness, need, and death. This negative reality is definitely an infernal, and no heavenly one, as everybody can imagine. Then a heavenly reality can be only the polar opposite of that. But how can one imagine that, if you only know the hellish time, and nothing else? And how should it be explained by what, so that it is a normal consumer understandable? The eternity, as a time conservation, we had already dealt in the 006 time sequence. If we had, however, the bare conservation of a negative time, as eternity, this would mean an infernal eternity. However, this is excluded due to the polarity, which in the existence has to be valid, always and for everything. Then the time conserved must contain a form of time, which allows to experience not the hell, but the heaven. But, where can a polar heaven be hidden? In the infernal time, e.b. Now, with it we come again back to the Bible, and its last part, the John Revelation or Apocalypse. Since there one says, in chapter 5, verse 6, "And I saw in the middle of the high seat, and of the 4 beasts, and in the middle of the rulers, a lamb in its place, which seemed as if it had been put to death, having 7 horns, and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, sent out into all the earth." Because now the reality in its causality must be ever a closed reality, we get as a result a universe which is closed in itself even. The whole earth, that is called in the verse, must be then the complete universe, namely from beginning till the ending. The 7 spirits of God encompass thus in their holistic dispersal the entire universe, from its beginning to its ending. If one takes seriously this, then it must have dramatic effects on our self and world understanding, e.b.
You can really say that. And, indeed, if one views itself the apocalypse closer, in relation to the called new humanity there, with its personal transformation. So, chapter 7, verse 14, where it says, among other things, "These are they who came through the great testing, and their robes have been washed and made white in the blood of the Lamb." We have in this text no time limitation, so that in the closed reality of the universe, this relates to the total humanity. And that means that everyone is going through a personalized new reality with his personal conversion as symbolically washing clothes. Where from an evolutionary point of view, everyone as a human has to be valid who is able to receive universal spirit and to reflect. Who does not meet this specific demand is still animal monkey and not, or not yet, human. But if every human with his transformation undergoes an individual reality, then we get exactly what you mean gnosis. So, how already called by you, the dramatic effects on our self and world understanding. For our normal self and world understanding knows only one objective reality in which everybody participates and is valid for everybody. But that every human could have an individually own reality with his own individual history is strange for us without knowledge. And nevertheless, exactly this arises with a personal change initiated and directed from the universal spirit. Also is by Jesus in the Thomas text saying O22 the corresponding hint for it given. It says towards the end, if you see with new eyes and act with new hands and go with new feet and make a new picture of you, then you come into the God's kingdom. Ergo, the realm of the new humanity, which consists of a personal, fully converted people in adapting to the world originator. By the logic becomes clear that a new reality must represent a new humanity, namely with all what belongs to it, how, time and space. If we think now the idea further, we get in the quintessence a multiverse as universe, in the manner that with every converting person, the universe at the same time with a corresponding conversion is new adapted, focused on the individually converting person for its adaptation to the person of the world originator. What logically necessarily lead to a multiversal universe according to the pluralism of all converting people. Because each of the converting person is in a special sense the quantum mechanical observer of itself. But with the multiverse of the astrophysicist has it nothing to do, which won't abolish the universe over a boundless multiverse. Although their idea of a multiverse in principle cannot be wrong. The multiverse as such must be precisely identified only as a property of an all-encompassing universe. Because people are able to reflect this universe individually in time and space, results this necessarily in a multiversal but always total singular universe. Is this not unbelievable, gnosis?
Just because it is unbelievable, but true, has it a dramatic effect on our self and world understanding. However, only for those people which possess the spiritual skills, intellectual to disclose the matter for itself. The personal transformation is naturally an imperceptible unconscious process. 4. The subjective consciousness has to readjust constantly itself, in order to be able to follow its own process. Since this permanence is deliberately not to cope, happens it unconsciously, and without to charge the person with it. With a changing consciousness, in the course of the personal transformation, changes also at the same time the reality in same way, but imperceptibly. As you already said, Evie, this is an individual reality, which is unwinding itself within the scope of a multiversal universe. Because each person, which is converting itself in space and time, forms so a multiversal facet of the universe. Who has gained thereto, up to now, no own personal experience, will hardly be able to believe. But in logic, the matter is clear, and no matter of faith, but quasi a matter of mathematics. Especially the quantum physics, with the collapsing wave function due the experimentalist, can prove subjective reality as a principle. And fundamental subjective reality again, can be only a multiversal facet of an objectively real universe. Many of the up to now inexplicable phenomena in the nature, as for example also some UFO sightings, must have in it their reason. 4. It would be naive to assume from the fact that it comes with the multiversal facets of the universe to no overlappings. These are intersections, which can entail, as selective spatio-temporal congruence, and energetic and material strengthening. More can and I will not say, because I don't like speculate without closer concrete knowledge. However, conceivable and imaginable is from the logic that selective overlappings would have to become perceptible and visible in any manner. What surprises me with the whole topic is that with the multiversal facets in the world history, apparently nothing changes. Since according to causality law, the final effect has to perform the beginning cause, what needs an absolute aim guidance? Then there must be an active principle, only that, integrative to include into the conversion process, what absolutely indispensable for this process is. This is extremely intelligent, and guarantees thus effectively, a minimum of multiversal selective intersections. Although they can be apparently switched off, not totally. Already the leading physicists of the early 20th century could it not avoid to postulate an effective universal spirit. Prominent statements thereto are known in particular by Albert Einstein and Max Planck. But this is ignored studiously by the today's physicists in order without other ideas to this universal spirit not to come into the brooding. As already in a previous sequence was said, no ideas are possible for that, without crucial basic informations. Then one turns frustrated in a circle, and begins to hate the subject, and to avoid, wherever possible. However, about the causality law, we get with the universal person, also the necessarily universal spirit. Einstein and Planck would very probably have had their true joy in it, if they would have known the causality law. In fact, Einstein was right when he said that God does not play dice. However, it's debatable what he had really meant. It is sure then only that him the causality law would have released from his suffering of the uncertainty of a world originator. So far so good, my little excursion into the world of physicists, EB.
Yeah, better let us leave now the world of physicists. At this point we want to thank once for the valuable knowledge which was given to us up to now in physics and astronomy. So we come back again to the genius of Jesus Christ as it is revealed in the Bible and especially in Thomas' Gospel. For there Jesus offers himself as the new eternal reality, but which has to be believed in order to become reality. First, as a subjective individual reality within an outer, polar other reality which is called time world. This subjective, individual reality is to be understood as a kind of booking to an eternity world, polar different to the time world. We read this booking in the Bible at two places as enrollment in a book, as it says in Revelation chapter 20, verse 12. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged by the things which were in the books, even by their works. Or in Revelation chapter 3, verse 5. He who overcomes will be dressed in white, and I will not take his name from the book of life, and I will give witness to his name before my Father and before his angels. The universal self-overcoming is valid at the same time as a world overcoming, what is understood as a book enrollment. whereby first with the self-overcoming the personal conversion process can begin, which lasts until the end of life. One ends in the infernal time world as a dead person in order, according the book directory, to begin as a living person in the heavenly eternity world. And how already Jesus quite rightly said, with God nothing is impossible. In itself impossible let become possible within the framework of the laws of nature. Without magic, that must mean changes at the reality. This in turn is only possible without magic when one is the universe in person and therewith also the reality in person. Only then one has the power and ability to determine what is real and what is not. Where automatically on such determination follows the realization as we read in some Bible verses. In particular, in the history of creation, where God effectuates solely by His word things to appear. Conversely, that it works in the same manner, whereby now things disappear without a trace. This is the omnipotence of the Almighty, realities immediately to let appear or disappear. In view of the universe and his system, however, there is generally nothing to change. With only one single functional possibility, everything must remain as it is. Otherwise the fairness could not be in its existence of a bipolar universe.
I know what you mean, Evie. The causal monopole, together with the causal final system pole, are unalterable for the existence of being. And both poles come true, at the same time, in one single act, in the interface from beginning and ending, and with its zeros selective. In our 008 sequence, concerning the 0 point, we had already discussed this. The super-reality of existence is thus an in itself closed, and back-closed 0 point. This shows the universe as a mere process of self-back-closing of this all-encompassing total singular 0 points. For this 0 point, as an existential reality, there is only one possibility for a self-process. And it exists recognizably in the following two polar self-functions. This is on the one hand, the function of a self-division, and on the other hand, the reverse function of a self-union. For, according to logic, are necessarily the following two principles. First, only this can be always separated, what exists combinedly. Secondly, only that can always become united, what exists separate. Then, with the all-encompassing existence, the question comes up, who or what should or can cause this specifically? If then the answer can only be the existence itself, then it requires for it the deliberate decision. For, why should be united, what is separate? And why should become separate, what is given united? Ergo a separation and union only then, if for that a good reason exist, which is then compellingly to recognize. But from what, or also from whom? From the existence as such? This can be possible only if the existence is embodied by a concrete person. However, concreteness bounds on opposite standpoints, and therewith primordially on subject and object. And only with such oppositeness within the unity, a separation of the unity can be made to an subject and object. Namely, as a process of backclosing between subject and object, because in a closed universe, everything must have its causality. With such prerequisite of a polar two positionality, the universal person can act as a subject in itself as an object. Besides, that goes without saying that the universal person must own for that, as necessary capabilities, a self-perception and world perception. 4. Without enabling self-perception and world perception, no deliberate reaction is possible to whatever. Exclusively, for the existence of a universal person, which makes all existence, is the unity to separate first. And secondly, then also at the end of the separation, the unity by a reunification new to produce. Namely, in order the unity to close. Because causality is closed, must it be caused compellingly too. These both polar basic functions of existence, EB, are also effective in physics. As attraction and repulsion, whilst attraction makes a union, and repulsion a separation.
Exactly, and in this manner attraction and repulsion become an additional proof for the existence of a world originator. So apart from the causality law, the first general and irrefutable existence proof, with the energetic Big Bang we see the separation of the zero-selective primordial energy to a universe. And from this cosmos arises at the end that person which produces with spirituality the primordial energy. Its personal self-repulsion compels its primordial energy in the Big Bang, from which all things arise, whereby also at the end the identical person originates again. But all that we had mentioned several times already in the presequences, gnosis. The reality of there-ness as existence and as an all-encompassing zero point is to understand quite properly quasi only mathematically possible. In addition, still it's two sides of an acausal monopole and a final causal system pole. So closed as the circle of the existence presents itself with universe and system, so conclusively are in it also all its functions. However, without polarity would all existence nothing, and therefore then only bare nothingness. So if you wanted to put outside in all the facets of reality and superreality a universal basic reality, then this could be only the polarity and of it derived duality and binarity. Who wants this half explained in more detail will get it in the 003 sequence about the polarity. The basic reality of polarity can be recognized in absolutely everything, because representationality or materiality is generally based on it. But also with the electric charges and other polarizations appears this basic reality very clearly. From the logic considered, fulfills the polarity the demands for a world formula which could not be easier and more persuasive. In the book Universe and System we have two options. So once with A is equal to EP plus TA, what says that all is based on attraction as EP and repulsion as TA. And once with A divided by A is equal to A, what means the all is the whole divided by itself. Also in it are included attraction and repulsion. So self-subdivision by an energetically big-banging self-repulsion. And self-union by a personal joining of subject and object to the original unity. And at the same time a reproductive regeneration of the zero-selective primordial energy. Like there can be only a single zero. In the same way exists only one single universe in an all-encompassing. I think that you are surely will be able to confirm this gnosis.
One single zero as just one all. We can hold on this in these 017 sequences about the reality in such a way as a final reality. More reduction is quite obviously not possible. By the way, the zero was invented in ancient India and then came over the Orient at last to Europe. What means that the zero is the only real number that is neither positive nor negative. 4. With the zero results a kind of superposition, as it also results from the all, as universal whole. Namely, at its beginning and ending, according to the causality law, after which the final effect has to perform the beginning cause. Would the final effect not perform the initial cause, thus the universe would eliminate therewith its existence. And the initial cause can be performed only there, where with the final effect the circle has to start. You can twist and turn as you want, one comes not away from the zero, and ends up again and again at zero. And, in a nevertheless rather strange manner, we get a zero-selective universe, as a bare backclosing process of the zero. Therefore the universe, as a bipolar self-process, of the monopolar zero, suitably to the fact that it is mathematical neither positive nor negative. Negatively it would be, if in the 0 point no self-repulsion took place, because then, without a backclosing, the zero would disappear in the nothingness. Positively it is, that in the 0 point a self-repulsion takes place, because thereby the zero gets its backcloseness. However, because the zero is neither positive nor negative, take place in it both possibilities at the same time, in the form of such a two-sidedness. And because, in only one single position, positive and negative must annul each other, the zero remains monopolar potential, of a bipolarity via self-repulsion. Is this the last word in wisdom, for a zero-valued reality? Fact is, in any case, that we experience with our existence a reality, which we must define ourselves, multiversal individually. Not as zero-valued, but rather as a full-fledged world, of everything and nothing in one. If this world is embodied by a universal person, then it becomes clear at least from this side, that with this person everything can be possible, as it's been handed down with the Bible, where it is said, in Luke, chapter 1, verse 37, "For there is nothing which God is not able to do." With it, we have achieved the end of our today's subject, from universe and system. And thus we say goodbye, from the 017 reality sequence. We would appreciate and be pleased if the sequences would find your favor. Okay, then up to next sequence. It remains to us faithful and recommend us.